Hey, let's talk, not the Buffalo Bills so much, but what really everybody across the country is kind of talking about is what Vontae Davis.
One of the strangest stories I've ever seen. I could understand, and look, everyone's rehashed this, I could understand him retiring after the game. It was his first chance to play all season aside from the preseason. He may have felt like everyone's going 60 miles an hour out there. I just can't get up to speed. I came off a big-time groin surgery, and I'm just not the same player I used to be. I've had a nice career. I just don't have it anymore. But knowing that they had lost Phillip Gaines, and this team was down cornerbacks and needed that guy on the field to just walk away, it's one of the more selfish things we've seen from a football player.
Optics are horrible.
Let's use a little semantics here. He quit and then he retired.
Oh, don't be that guy.
He quit and then he retired. He quit on the field. It was funny. Someone made the point, what if they were on the road? You think he would have done that? And then he'd have to buy a flight to get back to Buffalo? I was in a locker room after the game. Players were livid. And you usually don't see players call anybody out. And to Dan's point, if he would have done it, take yourself out of the game. Even if they are shorthanded. If he goes to the coaches and says, I can't go anymore. And look at back, Vontae Davis, there were concerns about him in the preseason. They didn't dress him the first game. He was on the edge anyhow. Mm-hmm. They sort of knew that. He should have been done at the end of the game. We all know he made a mistake there. He will always now be known as a guy who quit on his team in the middle of the game, as opposed to finishing the game, then telling everybody he was retiring. Then he would have looked like a guy who realized it was done and didn't just try to hang on for the $5 million. And all these guys with their hot takes around the country that he's got $5 million guaranteed and he left, well, he doesn't get the money. Most of that comes back. The team will probably fight him for some of the salary from the original bonus. So players were upset and they had every reason to be upset.
In our pregame, you brought up what I thought was a real interesting case was Anquan Bolden. Mm-hmm. The similar situation somewhat last year. And is this systemic? Does this represent something that's wrong in that Buffalo Bills locker room?
Well, that's just it. These are two unique stories, and they are separate from each other, but something about these two things together makes me wonder if there is something going on here. Why would, and I know you have the injury we just talked about and everything, but why would you have two veteran, respected players in back-to-back years just decide one day, I don't want to be a part of this?
It's not even remotely connected, and I don't blame anything in this case with the team. Anquan Bolden realized he didn't want to play. The comedy in that was, everybody figuring, well, he didn't want to play because it was a bad team, and that team, while they weren't a great team, ends up making the playoffs. He eventually had some other opportunities, but never pursued them.
Okay.
This was different with, and if he would have retired quietly after the game, it would have been a non-story. He made it a story by quitting during the game.
I get that they're separate stories, and you're right, but I don't think letting the team off the hook is appropriate here because this is a guy who was due $5 million guaranteed because he made the roster. $3.5 million on a signing bonus for a guy that was released in the middle of the season last year because of an injury. And then after you give him that bonus, guarantee him his $5 million, you don't dress him opening day. And then you have to cut a veteran possession wide receiver to make up a roster spot, which you would have had you not kept him on the roster. Yes, him leaving in the middle of the game is astonishing and terrible, and he's a piece of garbage for doing it. But the fact that the Bills allowed him on the roster in the first place makes me scratch my head.
But that's a totally different issue than why he decided to retire.
Here's why I'm tying it all together. Okay. I'm not convinced, conspiracy theory time, and I know you love my conspiracy theories, that this wasn't premeditated. That he was embarrassed week one, that as a veteran player, they weren't going to dress him, and that he knew he was going to do this walking into the game. He releases a photoshopped statement, beautiful written statement, an hour after the game's over.
Well, that makes him even a bigger jerk then.
But I think
he had time on the drive home.
But I'm convinced that this may have been on purpose and that the Bills put themselves in this situation.
Well, if it was, then he's an idiot because that also cost him more. Because they could have let the signing bonus go by, and most teams probably would have. It was only $1.5 million, and in the NFL, it's still going to cost them against the cap. But they'll go after that money now. It was a stupid thing to do. He will always be known as a guy who quit. 30 more minutes, sitting on the bench, and he's fine. This is on Vontae Davis. The Bills have a million issues. He was a bad signing. They screwed that up, but this quitting is on Davis.
Vontae is an interesting dude to begin with. I don't know. I think the reason that we're making it out to be a Bills thing is because this Bills team has been awful for this first 2 weeks of the season. So I think that's why it's a Bills thing. And because we haven't seen something like this before.